What's up, Thrashers, and welcome back once again to the Thrash Maniac 99 YouTube channel, and I am back with yet another 20 question video for you guys, although this time, instead of responding to other channels, I decided to create my own 20 questions. So I curated these random 20 questions to really get the thought thinking, or to get the mind thinking, I should say, as well as just hear different perspectives about metal from you guys who watch the videos or will watch the videos. So, I have 20 questions that I came up with off the top of my head, and, well, curious to hear what you guys have for answers. And I call this the metal friend because I like to be a friend of metal. And also, I couldn't think of anything else clever, so I was just like, how about just call it the metal friend, because I tend to be quite friendly with a lot of people, so I figured, why not the metal friend, because I like to be a friend of metal, and I want to encourage more people to get into metal, whether it be through sending band links to people or to YouTube, so on and so forth. But without further ado, I have 20 questions, so for those of you who want to do your own video in response to these questions, be sure to tag me and this video in the description box of your video, as well as have all 20 questions in the description for everybody to understand and follow and all that stuff. But without further ado, let's get started with my 20 questions for the Metal Friend. Question number 1, what was the first metal album you bought with your own money? Well, this goes back to, like, my pre-teen years, maybe even early teenage years, but if I can recall, the very first metal album I ever bought with my own money was Metallica and Justice for All, although this is actually the third copy I have ever bought of this album, mainly because, well, the first copy I had got ruined. Second copy I had was a digipack, and a lot of times it just drives me up a freaking wall to have, like, a whole row of, like, when it comes to, like, a band discography, having, like, a whole row of jewel cases and having one digipack can drive me insane, so I guess that's, like, an OCD thing of mine. But anyways, if I could remember when I bought the album, it was probably, I want to say like 2009, 2010. Might have been as low as 2011 or as late as 2011, but yeah, this was, to my recollection, the first metal album I ever made. Or not made, but bought with my own money. I'm just kind of all over the place right now, as you can tell. But regardless, yeah, to my recollection, And Justice for All was the first one I bought. Question number 2. Who was the first band/tour you ever saw live? That would have to be Megadeth in 2022 in Cincinnati, where Fire of the Gods and The Who, HU, opened for Megadeth, who in turn, Megadeth had to open for Five Finger Death Punch, but luckily for my own sanity, I didn't even bother to stay for the Five Finger Death Punch set. I was there for Megadeth, and they crushed it live, and once Megadeth was done, I hosied my ass on out of there. So, Megadeth was the first band that I ever saw live, and I've been keeping a streak going of going to at least one show a year. This past year, I went to 2. Hopefully, I can go to multiple shows again this year and see what happens. Excuse me. Question number 3. What is one album that is seen as divisive to many that you will defend to the death? I'm cheating and I'm picking 2 albums by the same band, but they might as well be considered one, considering both of these albums were recorded at the same time, just released like 15 months apart. Metallica's Load and Reload. I will still defend these 2 albums to the death for the simple fact that I still think at the heart, both of these are good albums for the style they were going for, which was a more doomy, bluesy, hard rock inspired metal sound, which, I mean, considering they didn't want to repeat the Black Album, they weren't going back to thrash anytime soon, so why not try something different, try something new? and they decided to go into this sound. And I think for the most part, a lot of the songs on both of these albums are pretty damn good. It's just people want to shit on these two albums because they're not thrash. I mean, hell, you could listen to stuff off of these two albums and you can think bands like Alice in Chains, COC, for example. And I think there's some good cuts on both albums, like on Load. I would say like 2x4, The House That Jack Built, King Nothing, Bleeding Me, Outlaw Torn, Cure, and then on Reload, Fuel, Memory Remains, Devil's Dance, Slither, Where the Wild Things Are, I think is still, in my opinion, the most underrated Metallica song ever made. So, to me personally, I will defend both of these albums to the death. Question number 4. What is one album that is universally loved by the majority of fans that you dislike or can't get into? That was kind of an easy one for me, and that's Cradle of Filth, Cruelty and the Beast. I've said it many times before, I'll say it again, I cannot get into Danny Filth's Baby Squeals. I don't understand everyone's obsession with it, why he even does it. If he would just cut the baby squeals out of his vocal repertoire, I would be a bigger fan of Cradle of Filth. And that's pretty much where I am, where it stands with Cradle of Filth. And yeah, I know that album's like universally regarded as the best Cradle of Filth album, but to me, I just can't get into it for the simple fact Danny Filth's vocals are the wall, particularly the baby squeals. Everything else about him vocally is awesome. The baby squeals. Stop it. Question number 5. A band you wished you could have seen live before that band broke up / disbanded. I had quite a few different options, but the more I thought about it, if I had to pick one band, and that the sense that there aren't any tribute bands out there that are huge, doing big tours and whatnot, I chose Typo Negative. I really wish I could have seen Typo before Peter Steele passed. Granted, I would have been a teenager, like a mid-teen at that time, but I could have gone with like a brother or something like that to go see them, and it would have been amazing. So yeah, if I had to pick one band, it would be Typo Negative. Question number 6. Biggest metal crush. I was battling on this one in my mind forever, but if I had to pick one that I always felt was not only drop dead gorgeous and beautiful, but super talented, Simone Simons from Epica. I always have been a fan of her vocals, and also, not to mention, in my personal opinion, one of the most beautiful and most gorgeous women in metal, period. So I would say Simone Simons. Question number 7. Who is your biggest influence for getting into metal? It's kind of relevant for me considering at the end of this month on the 31st, it will have been 10 years since he passed away. My oldest brother, Andrew, or as we called him, Rue, when I was a wee lad, he turned me on to Metallica, Alice in Chains, Pantera, and haven't looked back since. I've become a metalhead thanks to him, and those were the bands that I fondly remember first. Granted, my tastes outgrew his, like, he was not a death metal guy or an extreme metal guy. He just stuck to, like, the classic stuff, or the stuff that was on the radio. But if it wasn't for my brother Rue, who knows if I would have gotten into metal. Question number 8. Who is the one metal musician you wish you could meet and hang out with for a day? That was a tough one, but if I had to pick one, it would be James Hetfield. I feel like seeing with interviews he's done and how people react to him personally, that he seems like one of the nicest, easygoing, down-to-earth guys in metal, and that you could talk to him about almost anything and have a good time, like getting some good insight or getting into some really funny stuff or just flat out jamming tunes. And I would love to meet James Hetfield, and I wish I could hang out with him for a day because that would be a dream come true. Question number 9. What is the scariest sounding album you have ever heard? One came into my mind immediately, and that's infestors to the depths in degradation. Yeah, this is arguably the scariest metal album ever. For those who don't know, this is a Seattle based death metal band that kind of border between brutal death metal and blackened death metal, because this album has some black metal tropes, there's some black metal screams, but there's also a lot of brutal death metal on here, but also lots of incantation worship. Now, of course, this band isn't without controversy, which you can choose what you believe with that. I personally believe, like, lyrically, there is nothing, like, insanely offensive or anything like that, other than just standard death metal tropes of gore and horror movie tropes and the occult. Anything else, you'd have to really dig to find, which I dug a lot, and that's that. But musically and production wise, it is murky, it is raw, it is heavy, it is downright terrifying. Especially even in the vocals, like, God, absolute monster. But yeah, I would pick with Infestor. Alright, question number 10. What is the prettiest sounding album you have ever heard? I came up with, the band was easy, but picking the album was a little bit tough, but then the more I thought about it, it made more sense. Opeth with Still Life. I could have gone Blackwater Park, I could have even gone with like an album like Damnation, even though it's not really metal, but I went with Still Life for the simple fact that, in terms of like being heavy, but also sounding really pretty, this was the album. Like, yeah, Michael Ockerfeld's vocals got lower in the growls, it got heavier, but the melodies are so lush. Like, this is one of the most lush sounding albums ever. I mean, top to bottom. The More, Godhead's Lament, United, Moonlapse Vertigo, Face of Melinda, Serenity Painted Death, White Cluster, just everything about it is incredible. Pretty, lush, but still heavy, still dark. But not in like a somber way, but more in like a, I guess you could say, seductive way, but it lures you in the more you listen to it. Question number 11. What is the saddest sounding album you have ever heard? I was torn between two albums, but in terms of like the sonics, the atmosphere, and the backstory, I went with Swallow the Sun, When a Shadow is Forced into the Light. Especially when you know the backstory and the context around this album. Pretty much, this was written in expression of grief by Yuha, the main songwriter and guitarist, because 3 years prior to this album coming out, or might have been 4 years, where he lost his girlfriend and frontwoman for Trees of Eternity, Aaliyah Stanbridge, to cancer. And it really broke his heart, and he wrote this album as an expression of grief. And the songs, man, they are so sad, but man, they're so well written. Like, the song Firelights might be the saddest metal song ever, arguably. But man, just top to bottom, it is somber, dark, everything. Question number 12. Funniest metal song in your honest opinion? That would be... Oh dear, fucking gnat right in my face. That would be Psycho Stick's The Root of All Evil. Psycho Stick is arguably the funniest metal band ever, and the song The Root of All Evil is in particularly hilarious because it's all about going to the dentist and how much it fucking sucks. And it's like you're listening to like a comedy dental skit in a metal song, and it's awesome. Like, you even hear Rob, the frontman, with like the things in his mouth going, "That fucking sucks." It's just, and the drill and sound and the nurse and doctors and whatnot. It's fucking hilarious, and the lyrics are insane. So yeah, if you have never heard of that song, I highly recommend you check it out. However, be prepared to possibly bust a gut or piss yourself. Question number 13. What is one metal ballad that you never get tired of listening to? This was tough, and I thought about just picking every ballad by Testament, but if I had to pick the one ballad that kind of like led me down the path of Testament ballads, it would be The Legacy off of Souls of Black. Like, that song is beautiful. It's got some somber notes to it. It's dark, but it's also got some, like, perhaps some hopefulness to it. But the big drawing point of that song is Alex Skolnick on guitar. My God, he makes that guitar fucking cry in that song. Question number 14. If you could book your own dream metal festival show with at least 5 bands, which bands would you choose and why? With a caveat, must be bands that are active. So I decided to go with like kind of like something that could be easy for the audience to digest, but also give shine to a couple of bands that are either upcoming or need more love. The opening band, I would have Mesro. I'm going to keep pushing that band down your throats until you guys start coming back to me saying thank you for turning me on to this band, because this band deserves it. Mesro, Swedish thrash band that sounds very much like old Metallica and Testament. I think they would be a fun, energetic, thrashy opener for a 5-band, one-day festival show. Play 2 hours of awesome thrash. Following them would be the band Jotun from Denmark. Basically want to get some prog death metal, melodic death metal on the set, and Jotun would be a perfect band, especially for like the more epic metal fans. I think Jotun would be perfect. Following them would be Mastodon. Just for my own selfish purpose, because I love Mastodon, and when I saw them live in 2023, they were incredible. The penultimate band, would be Opeth, to kind of get a little bit of that brutal edge, but also lush and progressive again, and I think Opeth would be the perfect penultimate band to the headliner, Metallica, because biggest metal band in the world, and one of the best bands live, at least in terms of vocals and guitars and whatnot. I think that would be an awesome dream festival for me. Question number 15. What is one bootleg album that you own that you will never get rid of unless that album gets reissued by a legitimate label? While the chances of this album in particular ever getting reissued are slim to none, but I went with Pantera Power Metal. Yes, I admit, this was actually a fucking boot. I thought it was a legit copy that I got cheap, but it turns out to be a boot. However, it's a damn good quality sounding boot. Like, it's good recording and everything. So, unless this ever does get reissued, which I highly doubt, this will be the one bootleg I would never, ever get rid of. Excuse me. Question number 16. Who would you choose to have in a death metal supergroup? With caveats. Dead or alive musicians can't have multiple members from the same band, 2 guitarists, a bassist, a drummer, and a vocalist. For guitars, I went with Chuck Schuldiner and Trey Azektu. I think that would be a hell of a death metal guitar duo, because you can get some like great harmonies, lead trade-offs where Trey can do like the big dissonant dive bombs while Chuck can bring in the melody and shred. On bass, I would have the great Alex Webster of Cannibal Corpse. I think he's the best bassist in death metal. Drums, I went with Mike Smith, formerly of Suffocation, for the simple fact that he's just a fucking beast, and I think he would be a perfect fit for this band. And then for vocals, I went with Michael Ockerfeld from Opeth and formerly of Bloodbath, because he's one of the top echelon vocalists in death metal history. I figured having his demonic roar would be brilliant for a death metal supergroup of this magnitude. Question number 17. Who would you choose to have in a progressive metal supergroup? Same caveats apply, although I added a keyboardist and a female vocalist. So you could have 2 vocalists, 1 male and 1 female. For guitars, I went with John Petrucci of Dream Theater and Jeff Loomis of Nevermore. I think those two together would create complete, utter magic. For bass, I would go with Steve DiGiorgio because he's such a well-rounded bassist and he's played in prog bands or prog death metal bands. I think he'd be perfect for a prog supergroup. For drums, I decided to go with Gene Hoglan. I think he's just such the perfect all-encompassing drummer that I think he would fit. For keyboards, I went with Joachim Svalberg from Opeth because he really does a good job at creating atmosphere and playing along and in perfect harmony with guitars without overpowering the guitars. And then for vocals, for the female vocalist, I decided to go with a bit of a deep cut. I went with Ella Zlotos from Seor. She basically does like a lot of like the female wailing, but also like beautiful, like lush vocal parts in Seor, whether it be on studio or in live performances. And she could play a flute to kind of add a folky vibe. But for the male vocalist, I went with Dan Swano because he's one of the best all-around vocalists. I think he'd be a perfect fit. Question number 18. Who would you choose to have in a thrash metal supergroup? Same caveats apply as the death metal one. Dead or alive musicians, can't be multiple members from the same band, 2 guitars, bassist, drummer, vocalist. For guitars, I went with James Hetfield and Alex Skolnick. Hetfield's the perfect rhythm guy. Skolnick, I thought about going with Dave Mustaine, but I decided to go with Alex Skolnick because in my personal opinion, he's a better lead player than Dave Mustaine, and Hetfield, in my personal opinion, is a slightly better rhythm player than Mustaine. For bass, I went with Dee Verney from Overkill. Drums, Dave Lombardo. And for vocals, I had a tough time trying to pick somebody not from a band that I already brought up, but I decided to bring Germany into the mix, Tom Angel Ripper from Sodom. I think this would be a badass thrash supergroup that would do wonders. Question number 19. If you could have the power to bring one metal musician back from the dead, who would you choose and why? I went with Chuck Schuldiner from Death for the simple fact that he was taken from us way too soon, and it would have led to an interesting what if. Because I feel like Sound of Perseverance would have been the final Death album, at least for a long time, because Control Denied would have probably been the band to take off for Chuck, at least throughout the 2000s, and he could have ran with that band for a while to try and push boundaries of prog metal and so on and so forth. Then what I could have seen happen would have been similar to what happened with Carcass when they came back with Surgical Steel. I think there would have been a huge demand for Death to return. Chuck would have probably fell in love with death metal again, get Death back together with a whole new lineup of top-notch musicians, make a comeback album in, say, like the early 2010s, and been on an amazing comeback run and become one of the headlining death metal bands in the world. And even get to open tours for bigger bands like Iron Maiden, Metallica, so on and so forth. Hell, they almost got to open for Metallica in Italy in 2000 if Chuck was well enough to do it, but unfortunately he couldn't, so that got kiboshed because of Chuck's health. So, yeah, Chuck Schuldiner would be the one musician I would personally bring back from the dead. And then finally, question number 20. How would you best describe metal music to non-metal fans in 5 words that can encourage them to get into metal? Passion, power, diversity, drive, and heavy. That's all you need to know. But anyways, thank you guys for watching this really fun video to put together. Like I said, if you guys want to make your own answers for this questionnaire, don't forget to tag me and the video in the description of your video, as well as have all 20 questions in the description box to follow along. But I'm curious to hear what you all have to say, so I'm all for just hearing everybody talk. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, but until next time, keep your horns high and your dreams wet.